rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending.
You're talking about it, and so are we. It's What's Trending on BYU Sports Nation.
Yesterday, we aired an interview with Spencer Linton where he talked to Caleb Hayes Saturday after a scrimmage at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. If you missed it, check it out on YouTube. Fantastic conversation, 18 minutes worth. It was great. Hayes said this could be the best BYU defensive back group ever. Here's what he said.
This DB group, I feel like I feel like it's at least top 3, top 2, honestly, top 1 DB groups at BYU. Like I said, we haven't proved anything. You know, I can go off and on how much we're going to be great and all that, but we haven't hit the field yet. You know, we're not at USF right now to really showcase that. But all we can say, just trust in the process.
Okay, apparently it's the Philadelphia 76ers from a couple of years ago, but without Ben Simmons, which is great. Okay, Spencer, if the BYU defensive backs end up like Caleb Hayes is saying, top 3, maybe top 1, what would that look like?
Well, I think first and foremost, Jarom, when you look back at the great defensive back groups that BYU has had in history, and I mean, a few immediately pop to mind, like early 90s with obviously Derwin Gray and Irvin Lee and Tony Crutchfield, those guys. Then you go to 96 with Omar Morgan and Tim McTire. And then back into 2012 and 13, like BYU had a really nice group of defensive backs and a really nice defense overall. I think you got to look at the talent that has gone to the next level. That's the first indicator. So, I mean, we might not know if they're the best group ever until we see them perform on the field well at BYU. But then if those guys can make the leap to the NFL as well, like their predecessors in the groups I mentioned earlier, because look, BYU historically just does not put a ton of defensive backs and secondary guys into the league. We made a huge deal about Chris Wilcox being the first draft pick as a defensive back in 2021 since Derwin Gray was drafted in the early 90s. I mean, it does not happen often. And so if we want to see BYU take that next step, I think you got to look at their ability to get guys to the next level. We've seen some free agents. Michael Davis was talked about yesterday. But that's kind of the first indicator to me is like, okay, yes, that's a sign of an elite defensive back group, is that they can make that leap from BYU and playing well at BYU into the league. And then, of course, the results on the field. BYU, historically, when they went through all those whack years, I mean, they'd get into these just massive shootouts and like these high-scoring games, 58-56, 45-41. Like, that was very, very typical. If we can see those numbers of BYU's opponents stay under the 24-point mark, the oft-mentioned Bronco Mendenhall defensive mark, then that's a sign of a great defense, and I think specifically a great secondary, because with the pass-happy options that BYU is going to see this year in the offenses they face, the ball's coming out quickly, they keep everything in front and keep opponents to 24 points or fewer. Like, that's another great indicator. I mean, we can look at interceptions and like big plays given up. BYU hasn't given up a ton of big plays. The metrics that we see from Pro Football Focus would indicate that BYU has been really, really good over the past few years of not giving up like these huge game-breaking plays. Like that is another indicator. I would like to see a few more interceptions. Caleb Hayes said, I want a pick 6. Pick 6s don't happen often at BYU. Now, if we could reverse the big plays that offenses put together and see BYU make some game-breaking defensive plays, some defensive touchdowns specifically from the secondary, that too is an obvious indicator of guys being able to break on a ball, make a play, and give BYU some immediate points. And so those are my initial thoughts. I mean, I know you spent a lot of time obviously looking at the stats, but I mean, does it come down to very, very specific analytics for you, or are you seeing it kind of more big picture like I am with those guys taking the next leap to the NFL?
There's so few dudes that make it to the next level that I almost think it's unfair to try and assess BYU football in that way, because then no one really qualifies, or there's only been like a handful ever, maybe, right? This isn't DBU, right? This is QBU, this is tight end U. So I think we almost have to assess a little differently this position, but I agree with you that the best secondaries that come to mind when we compare this group, should they be that good, is exactly what you said. It's 1990. It's 2001, it's 1996, it's 2012. I love that one. Think about 2012, Jordan Johnson and Preston Hadley at the corners. Neither of those guys had a cup of coffee or a postum in the NFL, but they were great collegiate cornerbacks. Like, if you want to talk about one of the best cornerbacks in BYU history is Tom Homo. Tom Homo had like a bunch of pick sixes, including in the 81 Holiday Bowl against Washington State, including against Georgia and that Herschel Walker offense in 82, where BYU almost won
NFL
in
guy.
the hedges. Yes, NFL guy, Super Bowl champ, 1 time as a player, 3 times as a coach for Tom, right? So, yeah, Derwin Gray played in the NFL for several years. It's not necessarily the NFL for me, per se. I think with this group, and think about this group, there's not a lot of BYU football teams who will have played a schedule like this in history. That 91 group, certainly, several independent groups. But to me, yeah, I look at interceptions. The secondary itself had 10 last year. That's a decent number. If they can get a few more, that's great. PBUs, 36 is a pretty good number. 12 from Caleb Hayes by himself, by the way. How about that?
Yeah.
Pass
Next
efficiency,
level.
it's not a secondary number only. It's the whole defense, but BYU was 54th. They can do better there. Yards per attempt allowed, 60th in the country. Again, that's the whole defense. But Cougar Stats has a good metric that I like here. BYU opponents had 121 passes which weren't completed, so incompletions or interceptions last year. Of those, 52 were defended, batted down, intercepted, right? 43%, that rate, highest in the country. I wonder if this group's better than we think. Obviously, the Caleb Hayes stat sticks out as well. We'll repeat it because it's so good, courtesy of Pro Football Focus. 18 times opposing quarterbacks threw 20-plus yards down the field at Caleb. Only 1 was caught. Third in FBS at 5.6%. So we like D'Angelo Mandel and Caleb Hayes and Gabe Judy-Lally. At safety, Malik Moore is a baller. Ammon Hanneman steps in probably at that strong safety spot. And then you got to consider Hayden Livingston. Micah Harper has moved back to safety. Jacob Robinson, of course, moving up to corner, kind of that nickel guy. Talon Alfrey is a guy who tore his Achilles. He's going to be in the 2-deep. This is a good group. Bill Shefflin, by the way, 2-time first-team All-WAC, got hurt his rookie year in the NFL. He might be the greatest, secondary player in BYU history. Like, Bill Shefflin obviously blocks the punt in the Miracle Bowl, which he's known for, but he was incredible. So there have been some really good secondaries. I really like the talent that BYU has now in the group. I'm very confident in 4 to 5 guys. When Michael Harper gets healthy, he adds to that group. I'm stoked. And when BYU has a good secondary and you're not giving up big plays, guess what? You're going to be in the biggest games like Notre Dame, like at Oregon, like Baylor and Arkansas.
Yeah, we should note that BYU's athletic director, Tom Homo, just gave Bill Shefflin a shout-out for sure. That was a very talented secondary in the early 80s for the Cougars. Like, I know Jimmy Mack gets a lot of the credit. That was a really, really good defense. So you got to appreciate Tom Homo looking out for his guy, Bill Shefflin. Jarom, I love the guys that you bring up on this current roster. The defensive back group, I feel like we just kind of go round and round with this record. Like, I'm sorry if you're tired of hearing about it, but we think that we kind of tend to agree with Caleb Hayes. We think this could be like a top 3 group all time because, and you talked about the difficult schedule that they're going to face this year. I feel like BYU and this group are ready to face the schedule this year because of what they faced last year and what they accomplished against last year's schedule. Albeit against a down Pac-12, but still, like 7 Power 5s, Jarom. 6-1 against 7 Power 5s, and they put up some pretty good numbers. So I don't feel like it's too difficult for this group to handle. They've played and accomplished a lot of meaningful things in meaningful games with big-time snaps. I trust Caleb. I mean, he said, look, we're not scared. We're not scared of anybody. We have seen basically everything. We have seen some elite receivers. And going back a few years before, BYU taking on the likes of USC and Tennessee with Juwan Jennings and all of these dudes that are in the NFL now. Like, they have seen so much over the last few years. They've built to this wealth of experience. It's time for it to pay off, and I think it will.
And we're not saying, there are 3 first-round picks in this. Like, maybe there are some NFL draft picks here, and that's exciting. But this, against BYU historically, this group stacks up, which is very exciting.